It's a weird thing to say, but I guess I'm a professional reader. That's really what authors are. Having written 11 books now, I've read a lot of books. So what I thought I'd do today is explain my method for reading, for organizing what I read, and keeping what they call a commonplace book that organizes all that information in a system that I can refer to in the course of my actual life and do on an almost daily basis. So when I read with a pen, and I read physical books. I know that other mediums are easier, but to me, with too many screens in our life, you're watching this on a screen, reading should take you away from screens, ideally. I take the time and I sit down with a physical book. As I'm reading, I'm either highlighting, writing in the margins, I'm breaking it apart, I beat the crap out of it. When I meet people who have read my books and they show me all the dog-eared copies and that they beat the crap out of it, I take that as praise. You're supposed to be in an argument, in a discussion. It's a two-way street with you and the author. So when I read, I fold the pages. Sometimes I use these highlighter flags. I'm having a conversation. This is Cicero's On the Good Life, which I bought 15 plus years ago and I read and I took these notes, but I was actually just rereading it yesterday for a project I'm researching. So you'll see there's different, some of it's in highlighter, some of it's in pen. And as I was reading it, it occurred to me that I think I'd read it another time about 5 or 6 years ago looking at a project. So you'll see in the margins the things sometimes it's a word that I want to look up. Sometimes it's a story that I like. Sometimes it's an example, a moment in history that I know nothing about, that it's catching my attention. So I'm folding the pages as I read often as well. This is David McCullough's biography of Truman. Truman famously says that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders have to be readers. Again, you're reading to get information to make you better at what you do. So this is a short 1,100 page book. Probably took me a week or so to read. I spend a lot of time with it. I don't read fast. Speed reading is bullshit. But as I went through and read, I'm folding the pages that I like. I'm marking things that I think are of value to me. So you'll see I probably did 100 pages here. This is a practice that readers have been doing forever. You read, you fold the pages, you write down, you argue in the margins, you're noting what's important to you. And then what? So when I finish a book like this, I let it sit. I put it on the shelf behind my desk and I just let it sit. A couple weeks, a month, and then now's the hard part, especially on a book like this. I know my hand is going to ache by the time I finish. But what I do is I sit down with it and I break it apart. And I take all the things that I like and I put it on note cards. So like here's a little story that I'm gonna use in an email for Daily Dad. I'm writing a book right now about courage. And I actually use this exact quote here in the book. He said, "What made Mr. Truman great is that he decided." And this idea of not equivocating, of making hard decisions, making them quickly, owning them, this is an example of him living that idea and living up to it. So these are all things I'm gonna write down on note cards. So, let's say I do this book, I might get this many note cards on it. So I'm taking the note cards, where do they go? It's not in a black hole. I keep what is called a commonplace book. So commonplace books historically were done in journals. You can see Thomas Jefferson's commonplace book. There's commonplace book of Montaigne. They would just write down things that they liked. I do it on note cards because this is what I learned from Robert Greene. Robert Greene famously builds his books around note cards. So this is my commonplace book. These are note cards on all different topics, things that have resonated with me that I'm going to use in one of my books. So I have different themes. Themes about Stoicism. I have themes about strategy, education. The Obstacle is the Way. You can see in my book, The Obstacle is the Way began as just one little section of note cards in this box. And then eventually it spreads out to its own box. So in the corner of each card, I'm writing the theme of why that resonated with me, how I'm going to use it. And then eventually, if I'm going to use them as writing, they spin off, I take them out and I collect them. And a single book might be one or two of these boxes. So each one of my books is a collection of note cards that I make. Part of the process of writing the stuff down, and there's a reason I do it longhand, is that it's helping you create kind of a muscle memory. And I could just read these on Kindle, highlight them and send them to my Evernote. But it's actually reading it once, going back through it, writing it by hand, organizing it, This forces me to go through the material over and over and over again until it's locked in my brain. I've now interacted with the material so many times that I have kind of a fingertip feel for what it is, what it means, and how I might use it. Really what a commonplace book is kind of like a backup hard drive of your brain. It's things you couldn't possibly remember, but you kind of have a vague sense of them, but that you think might be usable in the future. You know, The Obstacle is the Way for me, as I said, began as just a single note card. First, I read Meditations. So I read the quote there, the impediment to action advances, action what stands in the way becomes the way. So I first read the quote there. Then I read Pierre Hadot's The Inner Citadel. And it's in this that he calls that exercise turning obstacles upside down. So I went through it, I marked it, turned it into a note card, started a new category here in the Commonplace book. This book leads me to this book, which leads me to note cards, which leads me eventually to write this book. So again, it starts with the raw material and it's about the refining and the organizing and the checking and the finding patterns that eventually culminates into some usable idea. This isn't just a tool for writers. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. Chances are you're coming across wisdom or information in the course of your life that isn't relevant or of use to you just yet, but in the future it likely will be. So what you're doing is investing now, you're putting in the time now, and you have to trust that in the future you'll be able to put this to some good use. You might be looking at this and go, that took a lifetime, that took forever, I can't possibly catch up. But there's that great expression, like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but when is the second best time? The second best time is now. If you're not reading, if you're not keeping a commonplace book, it's not too late. Start, not tomorrow, not next week, start now. Don't wait for the perfect stuff, just start reading actively, read as part of a great practice, and then start putting in the work in whatever form makes sense for you. Again, I can't rave about this process enough. I can't overstate the impact it's had on my life. If you want some more information, we talk a lot about this in our Read to Lead course based on that famous quote from Truman about readers and leaders. You can check that out at dailystoic.com/reading. It's one of the best things I think we've done. And almost every story in it, ironically, came from the archives of my Commonplace book. I've heard from thousands of people over the years who've started their own process because of it, and I hope you become one of them. Hey, it's Ryan Holiday. Thank you so much for watching our videos. Every day I send out an email inspired by the best Stoic wisdom, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, all designed to help you live a better life. That's what I'm trying to do. The email takes 5 minutes to read. Over 300,000 people get it. That's the largest community of Stoics ever in the history of the world. I'd love to have you check it out. Totally free, unsubscribe whenever you want, but I think you'll like it. Sign up at dailystoic.com/email.